Yeah, we're ready.
We're ready to listen.
We are ready to go. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Falmouth Select Board. It is Wednesday, January 11th, 2023 at 5:30. And I would ask that you all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would ask that you all please silence your cell phones, and if there's anyone in the audience that is making a video or audio recording of this open session meeting, please notify me as the chair. Anyone? Okay, thank you. So this evening, we called this meeting so that this board could get input from the community on what characteristics the community is looking for in its next town manager. Hiring a town manager is the most important task of this select board, and we can't do it and do it well without community input and feedback. So when you come up to the podium, please state your name and give us what you want to see in this new town administrator. And I'm just going to remind you about this public comment in that you are allowed to speak. You are really not allowed to make any comments on a person's reputation, character, physical condition or mental health, disciplinary matters, or civil or criminal charges. So let's begin. Who's first?
Who knows what they want?
Do you know what you want? Please.
Good evening. I'm Ed DeWitt. I live in Precinct 1, and thank you for the opportunity of speaking about the town manager and a new town manager. But I think first and foremost, what's really important is you as a board get together and decide how you're going to supervise the new town manager, because I think that goes to what kind of individual that you'll be looking for. If you maintain your current, or how you were managing the previous town manager, it was laissez-faire. And it was sort of would be implementing policy and then not checking to make sure that the policy was implemented correctly. When I was on the transportation board, we issued numerous reports pointing out lapses in policy implementation. The first and foremost was probably Complete Streets, which was a great policy that the select board adopted, but it wasn't never implemented. It was just, and this should not be a surprise to any of you, because we, as a transportation committee, met at least 3 times and talked about implementation of Complete Streets.
Mr. DeWitt, so supervising the new town manager is important to you, and I think we get that. Can you speak also, please, to what characteristics, what do you really want to see in this new person?
If you'd let me go on, I'd get to that point. There's nothing wrong with laissez-faire. If you have the right person in place, someone who has, said I'm not supposed to talk about character, but I'm going to talk about character in general. Someone who you can trust. Someone who is going to give you information that is complete and accurate. This did not happen under the last administration. A number of examples, again, came up in the transportation. The embarkation fee fund, excise tax, a number of areas, pavement management. Again, you were getting misinformation. Now, the other thing is I realize that most of you did not hire the previous town manager. That was a decade or so more ago. But a Google search would have pointed out that many of the same things that came up in this town allegations of bias.
Could we please, I don't want to really rehash that. I'd like to stick to the purpose
So
of our
all I'm
meeting
saying
tonight
is that you need to
really-
do a background
Got
check
it.
on the person.
Got it.
And, there were a number of indications that this was not a good candidate for a laissez-faire style of management. I think you have to match your management style to the person who's in the position. And if you have the right person in the position, laissez-faire may be the appropriate style of management. But when the current chairwoman of the select board tells our transportation committee that when you have a professional in place, you don't look to criticize him. And that is part of the problem with laissez-faire, is that you're just going to stay away. We need more. We need a town manager who's going to be proactive, who's going to be looking forward, seeing the things that are on the horizon. We have not done any investment in the last decade in this community. We've reacted, and that's all we have done. This town used to be the most proactive community on Cape Cod. It's in fact, when I got transferred to Falmouth in the Coast Guard, we looked around the communities on the Cape, and one of the things my wife and I looked for was a proactive community that was out in front, and that was Falmouth. And we've lost that, and it's sad. And so I think there's a lot that you really need to do, but I do think that first and foremost, you really need to figure out how you're going to interact with the new town manager, whoever that might be. Final point is, I think that it would be great if there is someone in-house who you hire, but I think it's really important that you look and see if that individual was an enabler of the previous administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Please.
Good evening, folks. My name's Ralph Herbst, Precinct 8. More than 25 years as a town meeting member, 14 years on the planning board, 10 years on the Community Preservation Committee, and 1 year on the Transportation Committee. I have been involved in the town almost since I first moved here, and I've been through 4 town managers. And so I've seen a wide variety of management styles from those people up close. Ed's aviation background, so is mine. I'm a retired airline pilot and Air Force pilot. What I'd like to emphasize to you is what you're going to look for in this town manager selection. I'd like to refer to an aircraft accident, and that you will find that is apropos, where 2 747s on the island of Tenerife back in 1977, due to several different circumstances like weather and so forth. You had a Pan Am aircraft that was piloted by English-speaking pilots. You had a Spanish air traffic controller who spoke fluent English, and you had a KLM pilot who spoke Dutch, but also obviously English. English is the international language for aviation. To make a long story short, those 2 747s, both of them the largest aircrafts in aviation at the time, collided on that runway and created the world's greatest air disaster at that time. There was a reason for it. Many different things were part of this collision, but the primary cause for the collision after the investigation was the KLM captain exerted his authority and was arrogant about it and would not listen to the other people in the cockpit and initiated the takeoff and caused the collision. So what I'm asking you to do is, when you interview people for this job, that you look into not only their education and possibly their experience in another town, but you look into what kind of a person they are, and that's going to be difficult. I'm hoping you'll be able to interview people that they have worked with. There was a problem in aviation of a dictatorial, mightier-than-thou type of attitude from pilots in control of an aircraft. Because of that accident and one other accident, the aviation industry initiated something called crew resource management. And I find that that would apply to a town just as it would to a flight that has great consequences if it's not done properly. You're talking about life and death in those cases. You're not talking about life and death with a town manager, but it's similar. It's really similar in that you have huge responsibilities as a town manager and large consequences. And the town manager really has to use all of the resources at his or her command to be successful. I'm going to just step aside here, but I'm going to give my good friend Doug Brown some handouts that I printed about crew resource management, and I hope these will help you in your interview process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Herbst. Would anyone else like to speak to the board? I hope so. Mr. Shearer.
Or tell us what you don't want.
Dan Shearer, Precinct 6. I didn't come with a long list. I came mainly to listen, but you seem to be a little bit short people who want to come up here. I think our charter tells you what kind of the education for a town manager we have to have. And if we go by that, I think we'll get a good man. But I want to get a very good man. And one thing we have to think about is what this town is. And I think that somewhat has been forgotten for a long time. We are a tourist town. We are a summer people town. We have to keep up our infrastructure of the beaches, the playing fields, the golf courses, and we have over 100 restaurants in this town, which I don't think many people believe we have that many. My wife and I took a tour. We were going to write a book for a charity donation. So we went through every street in this town looking for restaurants, and it came up with 107. We have the list. That was 3 years ago. I think some have left by that, but I'm sure it's way up there and beyond anybody's belief that we really have that many eating places. We have to have somebody that has had experience with older people. I'm 85, and I'd need more than someone young at 65, which is hard to believe. And we need a personable person, and somebody who can think, we're 10 years ahead of now, because it's going to be a big job with climate change and the amount of people coming into Falmouth. I really believe that it's very important that the man or woman live in town and become part of town. I was on the Charter Review Committee. We talked about this, and we really looked back at the best what people we've had, our residents. And I don't mean we have to hire a resident, but we have to have someone who may stay here and really likes the town. It is a great place. We have wonderful facilities and good education, and a place that really should attract more shouldn't come up there if you stutter, but attract good people. And we have to also find more jobs that aren't restaurant jobs and better paying jobs than it is. And I think that's about all I'd like to say. And you have a hard job, and it's not going to be easy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Shearer.
Mark Finneran, Grand Ave. The majority of you are relatively new to this, and I mean, our last town manager was here for 11 plus years. And over the course of that time, he basically used his interpretation of the charter, which says that the selectmen should basically be hands-off in the day-to-day operations of the town. And I think that over those years, the selectmen became too hands-off, much too hands-off. Day-to-day means, as it states, day-to-day. I think your hands should be in hiring, firing, promoting, demoting, and in almost every bit of business that the town manager is doing. You know, over these last 11 years or whatever, I mean, we were told that, you know, our budget was balanced and we had a AAA bond rating, but the reality is there were parts of our infrastructure that were just falling apart and totally neglected. And when I think of infrastructure in this town, I also think of people, employees. And many were neglected. I mean, we hemorrhaged decent people over the last 10 years. The proper hires and fires and promotions, demotions weren't done. And I mean, I don't mean to be critical, but I sincerely hope that selectmen take a much more hands-on position. The past managers had almost no interaction with the day-to-day employees. I mean, I walk down the hall, I say hi to everybody. Everybody says hi to me. I mean, these managers walk down the hall, nobody even looks at them, and he doesn't look at them. There's no respect, and there's not enough interaction, and I think that's where you come in. I just want you people to have more hands-on than I've seen over the last 10 years or so. Again, I'm not being critical, but the reality is you only have one employee, and that's the town manager. And I don't think that he should have been as free to do as he chose. As you know, like I said, I just want you guys to have a more hands-on approach. I mean, it's absolutely necessary. These things can get out of control slowly, and they did. And I just don't want to see that happen again to this town. I mean, there's many arguments. You can make many arguments that in the last 10 years we've gone backwards. We certainly haven't progressed forward. And it doesn't make your job any easier. I understand that. But hopefully whoever we find, you can pick somebody decent, but watch him. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Finneran.
Good evening, Barb Schneider, Precinct 4. My background is a doctorate in educational leadership and policy. My experience is lots of involvement in this town in different venues. I was also selected to be on the last search committee for town manager, and I was chosen as the chair of it. That was something I actually suggested to the select board that we end quite quickly. The reason I want to share with you is because there was a lack of respect for the process. There was a lack of respect for the person we had actually hired to come in and help us. It was embarrassing the way he was addressed, and there was no way we could work together for a common goal. Those goals need to be established before the search starts, and there needs to be a common coming together the way you do this. I also want to tell you that what I have observed in all of these years of working with different things in the town is that the most hurtful is a lack of respect for those who give of themselves to this town in all the different volunteer positions, in all the different committees. There has been, for some time, not a real good feeling from the top that those people are appreciated. I hope the person coming in, male or female, I heard you say he, and then you corrected yourself. Thank you, Dan. Whoever comes in, I hope that that person will appreciate that the way this town works is with 285 volunteers giving of their expertise, their knowledge, and their time. And I also think that from everything I did in observing what worked and didn't for leadership in all my years of being in charge of that, was people walking the halls, talking to people that they work with every day and being available in a two-way communication. That didn't happen for a while now, and it's desperately needed. And we need happy people coming to work in town hall. We need happy people coming to do their work in town hall with those who are working. And that's got to happen from the top up, top down. So I hope that's what you're going to look for. Degrees are wonderful and some experience is wonderful, but I agree that knowing the person has been one who can build community and camaraderie and a caring, happy environment coming to work. That's what really will work long term, and this town desperately needs that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Schneider. Would anyone else like to speak to the board? Ms. Harris?
Mary Harris, Precinct 5. I've submitted my list of characteristics that I thought we should look for because I thought that was the topic you were on. And there are 6 points in this, and if you don't mind, I'll go through them unless you want to just take what I wrote. Okay. The first one is they need to have vision. And that vision is something that needs to align with the vision of the town of Falmouth expressed in our comprehensive long-range plan. So it would be nice to find someone who's at least read that before they apply for the job. I definitely think you need somebody with experience, and it should be experience in towns our size or similar, and that have a town meeting, that have select boards, and preferably somebody from Massachusetts who's already familiar with all the laws and regulations that apply to the operating of a town in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I think they need to have financial acumen so that they fully understand the budgeting and planning process and have a very healthy respect for our bond rating, because the bond rating is something that costs every taxpayer a lot of money if we lose any of it. That we have the lowest borrowing costs because of our high bond rating. I would like to see someone who is an excellent communicator. I would like them to be a persuasive speaker, a logical thinker, and hopefully with polished skills, but I hope that we will avoid any fast talkers. On personal traits, I think they need to be honest, they need to be straightforward, kind, direct, intelligent, and one that I left off my submitted list, I think they need to have a sense of humor. And last, on the management style, there are a number of types, but I think we should look for someone who uses an inspirational style of management rather than a dictatorial style of management. I think an inspirational style of management would match with some of the things that Bob Schneider said, that we need to build community because inspirational leaders tend to do that. So I hope we would look for somebody like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
Hi, Annie Hart-Cool, Precinct 6, longtime member of the community and 9 years as a town meeting member. Much has already been said that I want to just repeat, but I agree that our town manager needs to be a citizen of our town. I think that that's really important. I also think that they need to work well with others, and I've heard that several times here. Vision was on my list. I'd like to see a work history that includes knowledge of tourism. I think Dan brought that up. We are an older demographic of citizens, and that would be important to have some history with that demographic. I like the idea that we would also have someone who understands the critical housing need of our youthful worker bees, our infrastructure folk, and how we're going to be able to maintain that citizenship in this town, which boosts the rest of us up. We really need to keep roofs over the heads of those folks who help keep the town running. I don't really know, I've heard tonight that there has been some lack of diplomacy from the previous manager. I didn't know this, but I think that certainly someone who is able to work well with others is primary. I know that when our former manager was hired, I was surprised to see that he had been fired many times. So I would like to see someone who does not have a history of being booted out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, I think that speaks to the vetting process and really looking into someone's background. Thank you, Ms. Harkul. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to us?
Here all night.
Speak for yourself.
At least for another hour.
This is your opportunity, even if it's small and insignificant. Any input is good input, folks.
Hello, my name's Jeff Brody. I've been in the town for about 10 years now, but only full-time for this year. So I'm new to all this, and I really wanted to come by and see how you're going to progress with this. I do have some experience with other towns a little bit. You got a tough job, and I appreciate that, certainly. I've got the sense of humor. I don't have any of the other qualifications, but one of the things, I want to pick up on a couple of points. I just heard, this person's been fired from a number of jobs. So important. I know of a town where it's extremely litigious for the town. They have many lawsuits against them because of the current town manager. They seem to be comfortable with it, but I don't think this town should be comfortable with it. I don't think we should be spending resources on that, or insurance companies, or however that works. Look at that person's background. See how much that town has had trouble with litigation, either from its own, from contractors, from its own citizens. Some of it's, I'm sure, justified. But on the other hand, you want to see if this is a repeating pattern and the town manager cannot work his way out of this, right? I have a friend who could sell you ice in the winter, right? So there's ways to work around this thing. Treat people with respect. They don't go to the courts as much, things like that. So I would recommend that from what I've seen. So many people have mentioned respect, leadership. Again, I don't know how easy or hard that is to get in a town manager, right? But in terms of having a town hall with functioning people from the top down, that's so important. He's their boss, but by no means is their dictator or anything, right? It's all got to be collaborative. I'm sure you've all been in business in ways where it's either collaborative or it doesn't work. People either want to come to work or they don't, and they do the least job possible. So see if you can find somebody who can inspire. I think inspire was the word I heard. Yeah, so can inspire people like that. And finally, someone who's got certainly a vision for the town, and this is where I'm not really familiar with things, a vision for a coastal community. And that might be a very special talent that a town manager from up near Boston, in these suburbs of Boston might not have, for example. And of course, anybody can learn these things, but again, something if you can find, that would be fantastic for this town, And finally, encourage you guys. You're the vision right now, and instill that vision in the next town manager. You don't want them. You want them to work as a team. It takes a village, rather than come in here and everybody running everything. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good speech, somebody do it. That was very good. And see what I got up here? Your turn, Doug.
You can tell us also, as we heard previously, if you think there's things we should do maybe different. We've heard from a couple people. It doesn't have to be just about the town manager.
Yes. So we have hired Grow and White as a firm to come in and look at all of the pieces of this process. We have appointed a screening committee. The position has been posted. We have not, it's just been posted in the last week. So now we will wait for information to come in, resumes to come in. He'll do his piece, the screening committee will do their piece, and then it will come to the board. This is going to take a while, but we are on it. We want to do this very, very deliberately and make sure that we do a lot of the things that you have all brought to us to make sure we get the very best person in that position. Yes?
If I could just make one comment.
Can you just come, just so everyone can hear you, please? Thanks.
If I could just make one comment on the screening process that you described, since you're using an outside individual to screen this. I think particularly where minority candidates are involved and they're screened out, that should still be passed on to you, because unfortunately we still deal with discriminatory hiring practices in this country. And sometimes there's innate bias that may not be even, the screener may not be available. But I think having a second eye at any minority or person who might be handicapped along those lines should get a second look. And I think that should come from here.
Well said.
Yes. Hi, I'm Gina Mapp. I was thinking that you should identify your look-fors, some non-negotiables, some nice-to-haves, and need-to-haves. And just depending on who shows up in the candidate pool, of course, pay attention to minority, BIPOC, just all candidates. But depending on the pool, just look for a good fit. Thank you.
Could you do me a favor and repeat those? I only got a few of them.
Yes, identify your look-fors, what specifically you're looking for in a candidate, and if you have some non-negotiables, some things that you absolutely need and are going to require of this candidate, some nice-to-haves or need-to-haves, just in case your pool doesn't have everyone or everything that you need. And just with the candidates that you have, look for a best fit, because you guys know the town and you know what we're looking for. So that candidate may or may not have every single thing on your list, but look for situational awareness, see if they're a good fit for this town. And we'll trust you to make your best judgment.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Robert Muscali, Oxbow Road. First of all, I want to thank and compliment the Select Board for this process. It's certainly indicative of an openness that you all have, and I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm sure everyone else does. I certainly echo all of the characteristics that Ms. Harris mentioned. I think they're all very, very important in your selection. The only other thing that I would add is that I think any candidate should support the concepts of equity, diversification, and inclusion. And to the issue of residing in town, given the cost of housing here and the lack of it, I would not think that that's a must. It would be good to have a resident, but more importantly, someone who is willing to be, even if not a resident, part of the community and open and willing to meet with the community on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muscali.
Good evening. I'm Judy Fenwick, Precinct 1. Is a member of the consulting firm here this evening?
He is not.
Okay. So several of you know that I do my homework when there's an opportunity to come speak. And so a couple of the things that I did last night was I went on the town's website and looked for the notice of vacancy, the job description. And what is posted is on behalf of the consulting company. It's notice of vacancy for town manager, 4 paragraphs. I read through them. Some of the language sounded familiar. So I went, it references that there's further information in the town charter. Sorry, I just ran from work. And so I went and looked at the town charter section, I think it's Article 5, Section 2, on qualifications. And paragraph 2 of the notice of vacancy is a cut and paste, along with paragraph 3 from the charter, and pretty much verbatim. One of the things that I was curious about is folks, I assume the consulting company cut and pasted from the charter to make sure they had the language correct. So the language that's here is from the original charter, which was passed in 1990 town ballot to establish the Home Rule Charter. And that language is 32 years old, and this is still verbatim. So I'm a little distressed or disturbed that the consulting company didn't look at other postings from other comparable sized towns to see what qualifications look like. Because I think in 32 years you might have a change in educational qualifications and professional experience. So that's the first thing that I'm a little unsure about. Also, at the end of the notice of vacancy, there's a statement that the current salary range is $180 to $210,000. I think they forgot a couple of zeros there. But so you were talking about things that were negotiable. There's also the very last sentence. It states that a position profile brochure can be found on the consulting firm's website, which is not there. Or it says, or you can email Richard White, which I did last night, asking for a PDF of that brochure, and I still haven't received it. So usually those kind of brochures are to sell the community to the candidate, and this job description is to sell the position to the candidate. So the fact that you are kindly having this forum for our input seems a little behind the cart, because the position is already posted. It's up on the MMA website. It's on your town website. And what input specifically are you asking for from us that is not going to appear in print anywhere?
When we were looking at a candidate, we were asking for certain characteristics that you would like to see in the next town manager.
Okay.
And did you just come in, Judy, because we've heard an awful lot of characteristics that this community is saying this next person must have?
Okay, well, I have a couple.
Please.
Okay, so, and I'll submit this in writing as well.
Would you please,
Yeah.
all these points?
Yep.
That would be great.
So I have 4 I's. I think the next town manager, that he or she should be imaginative and innovative and seeking to improve. And those 3 things are self-directed. And the 4th thing is that they would implement whatever came out of those things, and that would be under your direction. And those are sort of the quick action verbs. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Anything from the board?
session, isn't it?
It is, but you can also reflect. I
Yeah,
think
but
we
we should be asking questions to draw people out.
Go right. Do you have some, Mr. Patterson? Please.
Nope. I don't think it's time for us to put our fingerprint on top of these characteristics. I think we're asking for people to give us what they want, not us to give them perspective.
No, I'm not, that's not what I'm saying, anything about perspective. What I'm saying is I think we've heard some really good input tonight. There are things in here that I'm not so sure I thought of as clearly as people have portrayed, and so I found it very helpful. And I actually really like the crew resource management.
Some of the things that Ms. Fenwick came up with, is there an opportunity for us to have them adjust the job application going forward?
Well, there are some technical things that I think we
Exactly,
have to adjust.
that gives us a perfect opportunity to help
Yes.
clean that up, right?
I agree.
Here comes the sheriff.
Good evening. I'm here, I am Sheriff Buckley, but I'm also here as a resident of the town of Falmouth. I live in Precinct 6. I wanted to thank you for having this forum tonight as well. I have a couple of questions. One is, and if I missed it, I apologize, but if you could explain the thought process behind using an appointment to the selection committee as opposed to soliciting letters of interest from community members to see, who might be interested in serving on the committee. And then my other question is, taking the information that you get tonight, I guess first of all, are the members that you've chosen for the committee, are they here? And if they're not, or even going forward, what is going to happen with this information? Is this going to be something that's discussed at another meeting, given a charge or direction to the selection committee? In other words, what are we going to do with this information, and when will we see it again, and when will we talk about it?
So your first question in terms of the appointments to the screening committee, we did not solicit letters of interest, but we did receive some letters of interest. And in working with our consultant, we came up with the number of 5 people, and each select board member could appoint one person. And they had to do some work around who that would be, if the person were willing to serve and commit to this process. As far as this information, this is a public meeting. We will have notes on this meeting. Certainly the consultant will get this, and his work with the screening committee at the very first piece, they will have all of this information as well. Does that answer your question, Donna?
Sorry, I probably shouldn't have left the microphone. I guess what specifically, there are some things that we heard here today that are really interesting and thoughtful, but some of them are in conflict with each other. So how will we sort of decide what is the direction? In other words, some people were talking about having people live in Falmouth. Other people were talking about looking for the candidate first and then residency second. Some people were talking about a much more hands-on role for the board. Other people were talking about letting the town manager sort of do their job. So there's not necessarily an agreement upon what those traits are.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how will we determine that?
Go ahead.
Part of one of the presentations was requesting some sort of give and take. So it's not going to be black and white. You're not going to have a perfect candidate. What we're tasked with, in my opinion, is getting all the information, measuring character, measuring effectiveness, and doing what's best for the town to the aggregate number that we can come up with. You're never going to find anybody. You just ran for office. You know. You didn't fit everybody's bill just like the rest of us when we were elected. What you have to do is find the greatest number of common good that you can express, and then go with your best judgment to serve your constituency and the rest of the town.
Absolutely. I'm just wondering if built into your process or your conversation with the consultant, if that is an additional public part of this process.
Well, without the public's input, good, bad, or indifferent, and the variations in opinion, it adds content to our decision. You have to have things to weigh things off of and measure those. And that's why we're doing this.
And any conversation about the candidates that the board will have will be in a public meeting.
If I could just add,
Yes, please.
you know, there's limits, there's parameters of the management job in the charter that will exclude some of the comments because we have a structure. The town manager is somewhat autonomous. The only way that, if we don't like what's happening, we have to take action to remove the town manager and find a new town manager. We can't just go in and say, hey, I didn't like what you did yesterday, don't do it again, because it doesn't work. It's a cumbersome process, this municipal government. But there are some limits to it. We can't just walk into the office and say, I want you to do this, this, and this today, because it's just not the way it's supposed to be.
Mr. Patterson?
And I might mention that this is the way all corporations are limited. They have a board of directors, but the board of directors is not doing the day-to-day operation and supervision. That's the chair, CEO, executive director, whatever it is. We're supposed to be holding them accountable for meeting the policies of the board and monitoring them and you know, evaluating their performance and then making the appropriate changes if that's necessary. And I think that's what's going on. It's not easy to do that, and especially when you have board members who are elected coming on and off. You know, you always want to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, and you try to work with them. But at some point, you have to basically decide as a board whether this person, in fact, reflects the characteristics that you need to run a successful and productive and harmonious town to the extent that that's possible.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think more directly to Donna's question, I think what we'll have to do is look at some of the comments that we've received and see which ones are along with the charter and which ones are not, and obviously follow the ones that are along with the charter. And then the ones that are in conflict of each other, I think there needs to be a conversation about the ones that are in conflict, which one we think is more appropriate for what we're looking for. And all of those conversations have to be had at our next meeting that we discuss this.
Thank you. That's actually, I didn't mean to have you think that I was looking for you to comment on the substance. I'm just interested in helping myself and I think others understand what the process and what the conversation is going forward so that we can continue this sort of open conversation and get as much investment in this process as possible.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just throw out one more comment. I just would like to share that I think personally I learned a lot about the charter during this recent process that we've gone through. And I think the next time we have a charter review, I might volunteer to be on that board, which has never really interested me before, but now I think I've got a renewed interest. Because there are things in the charter that make it difficult to manage the town efficiently. So maybe we should look at some of those points.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Ron Dyer, Precinct 8. I have a suggestion in terms of part of your process. One, at the appropriate time, an individual one-on-one in a face-to-face meeting with each one of you with the people that you decide to review. But in addition to that, I think a multiple person on one, you or other people that you provide, having a get-together with each individual separately so that you get an understanding as to how they interact with one individual, but even more importantly, because of the job that we're asking them to participate in, a multiple interview session so that you find out how they interact with multiple people all at the same time. You then get an understanding as to how people will react individually and then collectively. And that's kind of important as we move forward especially with this particular job.
Thank you.
Hi, Jeff Brody again. A question to you folks is, people have brought up the subject of accountability here. And again, I'm not familiar with how this all works, but how is the town manager accountable to the selectmen? In other words, do you set goals on an annual basis? Do you review those? Is the raised, bonus, whatever? Is that an appropriate question even?
It is an appropriate question, and we do evaluate the town manager, and we've looked at how we evaluate the town manager. We've looked at that process repeatedly to try and make it better, make it more efficient, and make it more effective. So yes, we work on goals. They have to, this is all done in a public meeting, and we do have to submit evaluations on the town manager.
And do you feel there's enough checks and balances in that system that you can get the town manager you want and keep that person carrying out your vision or carrying out your thoughts of how the town should be run?
That's a very good question.
I think increasing the frequency of the process would help a lot more too. You could keep a closer eye on what's going on if you did it more frequently.
And I also know we've struggled with the tool.
We have, we had struggled with the evaluation tool parameters for years. Since I got on the board, my first year with the evaluation, I was like, well, how does this possibly relate to this job? So I think it's still, even though the one we used last year was better and more effective, I think we still need one that's really customized to Falmouth. And I agree with the suggestion that maybe it should be a biannual evaluation.
Yeah. Again, you brought up the fact of a corporation meeting regularly with that manager and all the things you can do in that case, yeah. They're not alone, and that helps them understand they're not alone too. They transfer some risk to you, it's a great process. If you can.
It also comes into play when the new person comes in, how they interpret the charter itself and how they feel their interaction with us and the frequency of that helps us to assess things in a more real-time manner. So I think that's going to be important going forward, to somebody that's willing to do that and push that charter, the way the charter is written, to enhance the relationship with the executive board.
Great, thank you. One final thing. Will this person be interviewed by the people who will work for him or her, excuse me?
The staff?
I believe there is a staff piece. I'd have to ask.
Very
Rick
important
White.
to get that feedback from the folks that are will be reporting to the town manager. They have to work with him. They'll hopefully give you some very good feedback on that.
I think we'd also like to have, if it's culled down to, let's say, 3 people, I think we should have a public meet and greet as well, because I'd like to watch that interaction as well.
And I can share with you that the consultant has interviewed the department heads and has noted all that feedback, not specific to each person, but in a collective narrative. And that, I believe, will be shared with the candidates as well, so they'll get a sense of what they're stepping into. There's also a narrative from the select board itself and one from the public. So this will help the person who's applying for the job to understand what they're coming to.
Okay. Yeah, the people who work for him or her can get a sense of is the person a control freak? Are they a micromanager? All the things that may not be exactly desirable. All right, great, thank you.
Good points, thanks.
Barb Schneider again. One of the things that came up during this process of deciding that the town manager was finished here, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things that came out all the time was that one person said he had met the goals that were set for him by the select board, and the select board was saying that's not true. What I found difficult as someone who's gone through that process for 25 years, is that when you set goals, those goals are on top of doing the basic job correctly every day. They are not just the goals. And if that has to be in writing and signed off on every single time you do a process like this, then so be it. But never again should we ever hear that just because you set 3 additional goals in for a year, that the rest of the regular job doesn't matter. And I say that, that was what came across as what happened in a dialogue about all this, and I hope we never do see that again. Okay?
Mr. Patterson?
Maybe I just add to that. I know when I was an engineering manager, I used those as growth opportunities, and that's how I inserted that into the evaluation. They knew they had regular responsibilities that they had to perform, but these were sort of opportunities for improvement, if you will, and that's the way I work that. So I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right.
And goals can be aspirational.
The other thing I think we should tell or work with our new town manager and some other people is to respect the amount of volunteers we have in this town, which we really think we do, but we don't. I've been on committees here for 50-something years. I've gotten thanked twice for my work or my 9 years or whatever it was in probably 30 different committees I've been on. And I think we don't work as a team. Our selectmen and our board of selectmen really have to get together and work with the people and feel like this is a real community job, because that's what it is. And we've got to have somebody that has the personality who can work with people that have crazy ideas and people that have good ideas and explain why the crazy ones won't work or whatever it is. Our first town manager we had was one of the best, I think, because he had an open door. He never said no, but you heard in a phone or a little note or whatever it was that what you asked him for, he can't do right now. And it ended it. And I think we've got to have somebody that will communicate with the general public and be out on the street and see them, not somebody that locks himself in an office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shearer.
Hi, Robert Dugan, Precinct 2. Just want to make a comment on the residency requirement. I know that this town went to a waiver issue years ago when we were trying to fill positions, but it seems that hasn't become an option anymore. It's a given. When someone applies to this town, they're immediately offered, you don't have to live here. There are certain positions in the town, in this case a town manager, there's an accountability that you have to deal with when you're living in the town and when you're actually part of the community. The decisions you make when you live here are a lot different than decisions you make for a community when you're here till 5 o'clock and then back home. So I think that really has to have a lot of thought when you're looking for these positions. If somebody has a very good reason why they can reside here, well, that's something you have to look at. But I think you really do need to strive to have somebody reside here, just for that accountability factor. And there was a comment Mr. Patterson made regarding, explaining on corporations and how you deal with, and giving someone the benefit of the doubt. I don't think this town has that option anymore, to give someone the benefit of the doubt. I think if somebody is coming before you as a candidate and they have specific characteristics, you need supportive information on their character, and you need supportive information on their actions. Because we've dealt with this in the past, and we've had the managerial problems. I think it's great that the consultant has talked to the department heads, but we are coming from a management system with our past town manager where there wasn't oversight with the department heads. I mean, you've had situations where the departments basically have acted individually how they think should run, and there wasn't any oversight. You need to have somebody that does have, not a daily basis, but on a weekly basis, they need to know what are the issues in the individual departments that they're dealing with, what's working, what isn't working, and if there's situations that are coming up in these different areas of town hall that's problematic, he needs to inform the select board. In general, you should have the same information on situations in the town hall that the manager has. I had to deal with the last town manager. I was on the zoning board for many years. I can tell you in my situation, I had personal meetings with the town manager. He was great to talk to, sat there and listened. But he knew of a list of items in the town hall that were problematic and needed changes, and just never implemented anything on it. And there was no one else to go to, because like you said, the town manager is the boss. I mean, that's who they answer to. So if they're coming from another town in another area, it's hard because they're applying for a job and maybe they don't want the other towns to know, what they're applying for. You have to figure out some way to find out what was their interactions with where they're coming from. Was there support within those towns with the management? And how did he deal with? But again, on the residency requirement, I just think there's an accountability when you're in a decision-making position where you're looking at the future and the growth of the town and how it's implemented. There's a large difference between doing that when you don't live in the community and you aren't actually part of the community.
I think one of your comments, Mr. Dugan, goes back to an earlier speaker about the information that the board gets being complete, and that we can trust the information that we're getting.
And have it timely.
And have it in a timely manner. So we absolutely heard that.
Mr. Chair, did you say there were cocktails at your house after this? Is that what we're doing? No. Right?
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to us?
If you think of it later, send us an email.
Yeah, and also you can also go online to comments at falmouthmass.gov and submit comments to us in writing right through January 30th. Anything else from the board? I think it's been really, really helpful. I think we've heard a lot of really good ideas. And I think one of the things that I really want to reflect on, all the pieces that we've heard about what you'd like to see in the town manager, but also how this board oversees the town manager. And I think that is a piece that we need to really think about and look at.
I agree.
In terms of how we hold them accountable, what does our process look like, what does the tool look like, how often do we do it? So I'm coming away with, not only with really good ideas about hiring the next town manager, but also how we need to sort of reflect on
Madam
what
Chair,
we
I think
do.
it's going to be important for us to be able and be willing to accept responsibility for the learning curve, their failures, when and if they happen, and be a unified group to be able to accept that responsibility and move forward with it to correct issues and accept the facts that there sometimes are insufficiencies in how we do things, but openly accept responsibility and move forward from them.
I would say also that we need to reevaluate our list of priorities and goals so that when we do start interviewing people, we can say, have you seen these goals? Do you think they're achievable? Do you think that we have the resources to achieve?
Are you talking about our goals as a board?
The goals as a board,
Got it.
you know, in line with our strategic planning, and, you know, we pretty much have it outlined, but we should kind of recap the highlights and give the person a sense of what's going to be expected. So we
think
should
it's a great idea.
revisit that again.
And I would hope any candidate would go on and look at our strategic plan
Right.
and kind of know ahead of time as well, like they need
But
to do
but maybe
homework,
like a recap of it.
Sure.
of This is what's right now is really vital.
Judy Fenwick again. The focus before when I spoke was on the section of the charter that relates to the town manager. But it sounds like as a board, you might want to carefully review the section about the select board because it does lay out your responsibilities. And not as specifically as some of the stuff that's listed under the town manager's purview. But, I mean, let that be your guiding principle. The process may change, but the section that talks about the select board is about your general powers, your policy leadership, powers of investigation, powers of appointment, specific powers, administrative duties and responsibilities. There's a lot there.
And I think we're pretty well versed in that.
Believe me, we've had to read that quite a bit over the last year.
Especially over the last 6 months.
Yeah.
I recently saw a book had come out that's the title, I'll abbreviate part of it, OMG, and then 3 letters, What's Really in the Constitution of the United States. And it is a very popular text in that it boils down each section of the Constitution to like 1 or 2 sentences that makes it clear. But the 3 letters that I'm leaving out are WTF. So anyway, maybe the charter.
Welcome to Falmouth.
Oh, well played. Well, you're thinking on your toes. Okay, if there is no one else who would like to speak, we still have time if anyone would like to come up.
If we sit here long enough, they'll get back up.
You want to wait? Okay. You want to wait them out?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.